Knopf Clipper, hi friends, Darth Momo here, and we're going to talk about the third arc of Andor Season 2, Episodes 7, 8, and 9. And these were some good ones. I still have some criticisms, but overall, these were good. This is what I was hoping for from this season. Going into this season, I had rewatched Season 1, and I think Season 1 is actually pretty good. So the first arc was a little underwhelming, and I didn't really care too much for last week's episode. I think so far that's the weakest of the entire show. But going into this, just the first few minutes, it felt like, okay, the air is a little different here. You know, we're moving. This was payoff for all three episodes last week, and at least one of the episodes in the first arc. The Ghorman Massacre did not disappoint. It was shot beautifully. It was executed beautifully. And it shows the true horrors of war. It was a massacre. It was awful. And, we see some things change. Cyril goes through an interesting arc. He seems to have kind of gotten on the Ghorman side, and when he realizes the truth of what the Empire's doing, and he kind of turns on Dedra, and he gets lost in the crowd, but then he finds Cassian Andor, and he tries killing Cassian. Cassian's like, "Who are you, bro?" And then he gets shot. I kind of liked what they were doing with Cyril, but I don't know how I feel about him just getting shot like that. Like, I don't know, like, at least the other deaths we've seen so far were side characters. So, like, it wasn't as big of a deal when they were just kind of popped off all of a sudden. But Cyril was one of the main characters. And he's been in the show since the first episode. If anything, I would almost say he's a main character right behind Cassian and Mon Mothma. So, I don't know. Like, I don't know how I feel about him just getting dispatched off like that and not even like a true resolution of his arc. I mean, I guess that's the point of war, right? But I don't know. As for Cassian's story, he was assigned to go to Ghorman to try to take out Dedra Meero. And I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed on this plot point. I'd heard some theories floating around that maybe Luthen and Cassian would incite the Ghorman Massacre. And I thought that was interesting. I'm not necessarily bummed that they didn't do that. Or I'm not like mad that they didn't do that, but I think him trying to take out Dedra would have been a nice parallel for him in Rogue One. You know, in Rogue One, he talks about having done all these terrible things for the rebellion. And that's kind of the promise of the show, is to explore some of that. And I don't think this show's really lived up to that so far. I wouldn't say Cassian's really done anything wrong per se in the first season. In the second season so far, maybe abandoning those people on Yavin would probably be the worst thing he's done. But even then, I wouldn't consider that like straight up awful. Like, he had to get out of there. They were ready to kill him and kill each other. Like, I mean, I'm not going to say it was a great situation, but it's not the worst thing he's done. So, I don't know. One thing we also see Cassian dealing with this arc is he kind of wants to step out on the rebellion. And this was actually really frustrating to me because, that was the whole point of the first season. Was the first season he wanted nothing to do with the rebellion. He didn't care, and that whole season was him going through the legwork and the arc of becoming on board with the rebellion, and that's where we get to the end of season 1. So that almost felt like character regression, just to put him right back in the mix with the rebellion by the end of the episode. So yeah, that was kind of weird. I didn't really care for that. As for the Mon Mothma side of things, first off, I still don't like the recast. I still don't like Benjamin Bratt being Bail Organa. That's Jimmy Smith's role. But that being said, he does do a decent job in the role, and assuming Jimmy Smiths was never cast as Bail Organa, and it was just Benjamin Bratt, I think he does a solid role. Or assuming Jimmy Smiths didn't want to come back after the prequels, and they had to recast in the timeline moving forward with Benjamin Bratt, you know, he doesn't do that bad of a job. But I still don't like the continuity of it because Jimmy Smiths is in Rogue One. Mon Mothma's story, though, I thought that was really interesting and engaging. We get to see her make the speech on the Senate floor. It was a good speech. I didn't necessarily have the pizzazz I was hoping for, like the One Way Out speech or the Luthen speech. But it wasn't a bad speech by any means. the continuity of, you know, what she said in Rebels not being said here does still kind of bother me, because they play part of her speech denouncing Palpatine in Rebels. So that's gonna bother me, but whatever. We'll have to work with that, I guess. You know, I can accept the costume change, but the wording, that's a little triggering. That being said, it does still connect to Rebels. You know, Erskine ends up back with them, and then he's gonna go with Mon Mothma. Draven mentioned, oh yeah, Draven was in the arc. That was cool. Draven mentions, he mentions Ghost Squadron taking Mon Mothma, so that was cool. No Rebels characters, but that's okay. We didn't need that. Maybe next week. Also in this episode, Cassian meets K2. They take out one of the KX droids, which those things are terrifying. Jeez, seeing them at like full power. Cassian, they kind of damage him. Cassian takes him back, and they reprogram him. And yeah, that was cool seeing K2SO back. And I know we're gonna get more of them next week. Melshi's back in the fold, so that's cool. We're starting to build up to Rogue One, so I'm excited for next week's arc. I genuinely don't know what they're going to do with next week's arc. I don't know what the story is, since we've kind of wrapped up the Ghorman thread that's been through the 9 episodes so far. Bix did leave, though. That was a little interesting. I don't know how I feel about that. She just kind of walks out of the show, but we'll see what they do next week. I've heard some people suggest maybe like Andor has an epilogue where Bix is the survivor, and maybe she takes the stones on Ferrix for Cassian and Brasso, and maybe Wilman at this point. Who knows? So I don't know. We'll see how that goes. I could see that possibly happening. We'll see. I think it would be interesting though, because Cassian mentions in Rogue One having a friend in Saw's crew, and Wilman Pack was working with Saw in the previous episodes. So yeah, that could be interesting if they kind of retcon that Wilman becomes one of the partisans. But we'll see. I think all in all, I'm going to give this episode probably an 8 out of 10. Like I said, I've got a lot of criticisms. Cassian's whole arc, some of the minor things about the lining up with Rebels, with Mon Mothma's story. Another thing, too, is just, like, we spent a lot of time in the Senate. Before we just kind of had the Senate chambers, but now we, like, explore the Senate building, and it looks and feels nothing like what we saw in the prequel movies. It almost feels like an alternate reality. The locations haven't really sat too off with me so far in this series, but Coruscant is the one that feels a little off. It was fine for what we'd seen so far, but just exploring the Senate chamber, it feels like a completely different planet than it does in the prequels. It just looks completely different. I don't know. I don't care for that. I would like things to match up. It just doesn't feel the same. And if I had to guess, it's because they're trying to keep things practical, because bad CGI, etc. They don't want to keep it. They want to keep it different in look, and they're trying to. Yeah, I don't know. So as for next week's episode, we'll see. Obviously, we know from the trailer Saw Gerrera is going to pop back up. I'd have to imagine they're going to deal with Dedra Meero, and that'll probably be her end. I'm guessing Wilman Pack's probably going to die. Tony Gilroy's already said that it'll lead right into Rogue One. Cassian's going to head off on the Ring of Kafrene. I don't know what the arc is, but if I had to guess, we're going to have kind of a self-contained arc, and then like the last few minutes will kind of be like almost like a reset, like an epilogue type thing, where Cassian's basically getting his new mission to go to the Ring of Kafrene and go from there. We'll see. I'm hoping Hera pops up. That'd be cool, but I'm okay if that doesn't happen. I'm guessing Mon Mothma will pop up in a Rogue One attire. And yeah, we'll get the Rogue One character, like Bail will probably be on Yavin. We'll probably get Draven again. We'll get maybe some of the other guys. I don't know. We'll see. I don't think any of the other Rogue One main cast members will show up, other than obviously Director Krennic will be in there and K2. But yeah, that's what I've got. I think so far these are the best of Season 2 so far. I'd say they're some of the best of the show. I think the Aldhani heist and the One Way Out episodes are still probably the top for me, but this had a lot of really solid action and moments, especially in the first 2 episodes. So those are my thoughts on this one. Thank you guys for joining in. Darth Momo out, and we'll see you next week. May the Force be with you. Always. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. If you liked the video, comment down below and hit that like button. Oh, and check out some of my other videos. I'm sure you'll find them a delight.